All right, here's one more for you, and perhaps the last one for the day, but we'll see. Worker shortage likely to last for years because the number of working age people has shrunk. As America's job market rebounds this summer and the need for workers intensifies, employers won't likely have a chance to relax anytime soon. Worker shortages will likely persist for years after the fast opening economy shakes off its growing pains. Consider that the number of working age people did something last year it had never done in the nation's history. It shrank. Estimates from the Census Bureau showed that the U.S. population's ages 16 through 64 fell 0.1% in 2020. A scant drop, but the first decline of any kind after decades of steady increases. It reflected a sharp fall in immigration, the retirements of the vast baby boomer generation, and a slowing birth rate. The size of the 16 to 64 age group was also diminished last year by thousands of deaths from coronavirus. A year earlier, in 2019, the working age population had essentially plateaued. It is not entirely clear how population patterns will unfold once the pandemic fully fades, but even if the working age population resumes its growing, it will almost certainly do so at an anemic pace. A continuing drop in that population or even a tepid increase would pose a problem for the economy. A healthy economic expansion has always depended on a robust population growth to fuel consumer spending, justify business expansion, and drive corporate earnings. Without a sizable influx of new workers, growth could stagnate. That would mean there would be an increase in per-hour work. Still, some economists foresee a silver lining for individuals. Fewer people of working age could compel companies to compete harder to hire and retain employees, and that could mean higher pay, better opportunities, and other inducements to keep and attract workers, a trend already evident in the June job reports. The government released Friday. Average hourly pay rose a hefty 3.6% compared to a year ago, faster than the pre-pandemic pace. The workers would be doing better than the economy as a whole, said Manoj Pradhan, the founder of Talking Heads Marco, an economics research firm and formerly an economist for Morgan Stanley. If wages were to rise sharply, it could also help narrow the vast inequality that has increasingly divided the most affluent Americans from everyone else and left the lowest income households struggling to afford rent, food, child care, and other essential expenses. With the population growth sluggish, economic expansion would hinge on whether companies could make their workers more productive. An increase in productivity, often made through investments in labor-saving technology, could further raise pay. Living standards would rise even if the economy struggled to grow at what's considered a healthy pace. Last year, the number of legal and unauthorized immigrants entering the United States fell for a fourth straight year to below 500,000, less than half of the level in 2016. According to calculations by William Frey, a demographer at the Brookings Institution, the number of deaths jumped 8% to above 3 million, reflecting largely the impact of the pandemic. A fundamental long-term drag on the working age population is the exit of the enormous baby boom generation from the labor force. The number of people ages 65 and over will likely jump over 30% over the next decade. Yeah, I did see a projection like that. We've never been in this type of situation before, he said. There's just not enough young adults to replace the people who are leaving. The situation has been exacerbated this year by a spat of early retirements. That is the problem with the pandemic. Roughly 2.6 million who were working before the pandemic now say they've retired and not searching for a job, according to Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. Sharp gains in stock prices and home values despite the deep pandemic recession made it easier for many older adults to leave workforce early. One of them is Jeff Ferguson, a physician with Eli Lilly and Company in Indianapolis, who retired in April at the age of 59 after 22 years with the company. Having worked from home during the pandemic, Ferguson made the transition smoother, but he was also encouraged by his solid investment gains and by the strengthening of the local housing market despite economic uncertainty. I probably retired with a tailwind as opposed to retiring with a headwind, he said. If I had perceived a headwind, I might have delayed it. The pandemic also lent him a new perspective on life and retirement. Ferguson plans to travel around the country with his wife, a pediatrician, and catch up with relatives. Gad Lebanon, an economist at the conference board, said the drop in working age population will be particularly evident among Americans without college degrees. As aging baby boomers retire, they're replaced by younger workers who are likelier to be college graduates. Blue-collar workers, anyone without a 4-year degree, will become scarcer. That trend will likely create labor shortages in such industries as manufacturing, construction, retail, and restaurants and hotels. Lebanon estimates that the number of college graduates will keep growing about 2% a year, despite the population slowdown, while non-college degree holders will dwindle. This could make it harder for future college grads to find jobs commensurate with their education levels. Companies may also inflate their job requirements, perhaps demanding a bachelor's degree for jobs that didn't require them before. The number of people who are willing to work in blue-collar and manual service jobs is shrinking, Lebanon said. Pay is already rising faster for lower-wage workers. For the lowest paid 1/4 of employees, hourly wages rose 4.2% in May compared with a year earlier, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. That's more than twice the percentage raises that these workers received in 4 years after the Great Recession from 2010 through 2014, and are higher than the richest 1/4 of workers. Scott Seaholm, CEO of Universal Metal Products, a 285-person metal stamping company near Cleveland, is surrounded by an aging population and is trying desperately to interest young people in a manufacturing career. A study found that roughly 59% of the population in Lake County, Ohio, where he's based, was made up of working-age adults in 2015, Seaholm said. That proportion fell to 57% last year and projected to hit 54% in 2025. That's pretty shocking, he said. There's nobody out there to work. That's kind of ugly. More than half the workers in his 3 factories are over 55. Wow. And fewer than 1 in 5 ages 20 to 34. He has one 81-year-old employee still working a punch press. Seaholm's company belongs to a group that encourages high school students to consider factory jobs. He opens his plant to high school students once a year on Industry Day and tries to get their parents to come too. They want Johnny and Judy to go off to college, he said. That's all locked in their heads. Globally, workforces in most other countries are also aging, including China, which once seemed to offer an inexhaustible supply of workers. Japan's population has shrunk for a decade. Braden said that trend could potentially benefit American workers. Since the end of the Cold War in the early 1990s, hundreds of millions of people in China, Eastern Europe, and India have joined the global workforce, thereby holding down wages for lower-skilled workers and keeping prices in check. Now, the aging of much of the world could reverse those trends, Braden and Charles Goodhart, formerly an economist at the Bank of England, wrote in a book last year titled The Great Demographic Reversal: Aging Societies, Waning Inequality, and an Inflation Revival. Braden notes that in Japan, whose population has declined about 1% a year for a decade, economic growth has averaged just about 1% annually, but that means growth per person has been about 2%. If the United States could achieve that level of efficiency while its population grows just 0.5% a year, its economy could still expand at a healthy 2.5% annually, Braden said. Still, over time, he and other economists worry that the sluggish population growth could mean less consumer spending and a less dynamic economy. Workers generate innovation and ideas. They invent things, said Casey Buckles, an economics professor at the University of Notre Dame. When you have a dwindling working-age population, you have fewer people doing that. I did see a projection from that. They were talking about immigrant workers and how many immigrant workers you're actually going to need over time. And if you don't get so many over time per year, then you're going to have exactly what they said. You're going to have 30 to 40%, I think almost as much as 50% of people over the age of 64. that you can't take care of, which, like it or not, is morose. But COVID took out about 500,000 people over the age of 64 this last year alone. 95%, I want to say, of COVID deaths were people over 50. So that did take out some of the top heaviness of the equation. But then again, you had a lot of young people at the bottom, like 150,000 just die of overdose and just depression. So there's that. But that is the reason that you have to have young people or your birth rate at least a sustainable level. If you do not, you're going to have that problem. Europe's already having that problem. And Europe is not liking all the immigrants coming in. But the thing is that they do need them. Otherwise, Europe is going to go away very quickly. And the United States is on that path, which is why they've been trying to import children to the border since the George Bush Jr. days. So for the last 20 years, they have been trying to import children, a whole bunch of young people, which is why they really wanted to hold on to the DACA kids. Because you ship the DACA kids out, all the DACA kids are under 30, and they've already been educated. You already paid for them. You already educated them. So you ship them back. Guess what you're going to lose? You're going to lose like a couple of million DACA kids that have to be shipped out and shipped someplace else, and you're going to lose age-ready workers that are already in the field. So that tells you why they're struggling, which tells you why even under Trump, he didn't send those DACA kids back. He gave them a hard time. He didn't want to make them citizens, but he never deported these adults exactly for that reason. One thing that Donald Trump can read is numbers, and COVID has just exposed all the underlying things that everybody knows that goes on. Everybody at the top knows it goes on, but the thing is, when it becomes critical, you can't hide it anymore. All of a sudden, it comes out in the press, and this is just one of those picadillos, I want to call it, that most people don't become aware of until they put it in paper and somebody like me picks it out and reads it to you so that you can understand. And then you guys can actually be really smart and go tell everybody else what you learned and why this is. But you can actually go look it up yourself. I think I will, if I haven't already, I will post probably see it in the thumbnail. If you're listening to this, I've actually posted the screen cap of the Excel chart that shows you the projections if you don't get a certain amount of immigrants in, and shows you why you do need to have babies and replace yourself, stabilize your population, because the way that you have your population and the way you have your workforce built is, if you don't have young people, then old people can't retire, and then old people will have to work till they die. And that's bad for working people, for old people. It's also bad for young people, because you're going to face the same thing. And that is part of the contract that this capitalist society has signed with their people. That's one of the socialist contracts that they signed, about being able to retire and people not working until they die. But anywho, that's all I got for this one. I hope this is interesting to you. But this is BGS out, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.